Well, thanks for being here. As they talked about, the Democrats and Republicans last night finally passed a $500 million, what we call a tax correction, from the overreach we saw in the 2013 session. It's a good down payment, but it certainly doesn't go nearly far enough. And, Minnesotans, as they prepare their tax returns for the 2013 tax season, they're seeing the fact that their taxes went up dramatically as a result of what happened in the 2013 session. And they're not going to see much relief out of just this $500 million tax correction that was passed last night. And we actually kind of agree with Majority Leader Bach that because we are now in the top 5 in our tax burdens in the United States, that's not a place anybody should be proud of. And the $500 million doesn't move us out of that top 5 bracket. We've got a lot more work to do when it comes to providing that tax relief to Minnesotans and correcting the overreach from the 2013 session. And from a MNsure standpoint, House Republicans and Senate Republicans seem to be the only voices here at the Capitol wanting to talk about MNsure. We've got some bills in the House that look at the cost of compliance to the Affordable Care Act for our schools and for our nursing homes. We've got a bill that looks at some of the corrections we tried to do last year to MNsure when it comes to oversight for the MNsure board, when it comes to looking at the oversight of our MNsure program here in Minnesota. And those bills are the only ones that really are out there. We understand Representative Liebling has a bill coming up, but it doesn't go near far enough. And as I sit on the Minnesota House Commerce Committee, we're talking about liquor. We're not talking about the thing that really impacts Minnesotans the most, and that's their health care. So I'm not sure why Minnesota Democrats are afraid of talking about it, but it's time for us to lead and to ask the tough questions when it comes to MNsure. You've seen it in the papers, you've seen it on NPR, you've heard it on NPR, you've seen it on the news. There are a lot of problems, and yet the Minnesota legislature continues to fail to talk about it or to lead on this issue. And then finally on school lunches, I was very happy that on a bipartisan basis we were able to look at the school lunch program for free and reduced lunches. But once again, House Democrats were late to the table on this. We brought this forward in an amendment form last year, and it was voted down. We have amendments that would actually address the issue that we've been talking about, and that is the payment for free and reduced lunches from this year, from 2013. And that amendment failed. And we're going to keep trying for that, but it's not enough. So we're very happy to work with Democrats in a bipartisan fashion to correct these overreach taxes that we've seen from the 2013 session. And we firmly believe the $1.2 billion in overtaxation deserves to go back to Minnesotans. And we look forward to working with them on that. We do not support putting that money into a vault here in St. Paul for deferred spending so that we can spend it later. That's not the purpose of this. It needs to go back to where it can be the most productive, and that's in the hands of Minnesota businesses and Minnesotans themselves. So thank you.
Well, it's encouraging to hear the update from the House and the activity that they've had over there and moving of the tax proposal. And I want to give you a little update of what's happening in the Senate. So, thank you very much. This is really a story about, I think, a tale of 2 budgets and a biennium. When you look at a football game, you don't say, well, how did the first half go? How did the second half go? Gee, we won the first half, we lost the second half. What we are seeing in the proposals the governor came out with yesterday is an adjustment to a very, very large tax increase. And that large tax increase is still in place. And so we've had an adjustment to that, which of course we support and we would argue should never have been done in the first place, and we support that. And it's amazing to me that we don't have the ability in the Senate to move that along, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. I guess we'll have to check with the Rules Committee in the House to see what the progress of that tax bill is going to be. We'll find out later on. So we think that in addition to the tax increases, we've got spending increases in this budget. And what the governor's new supplemental budget does is increase that spending even more. $160+ million of additional spending plus the $450 million in deferred spending that is going to be put away for spending later when we need it. These are things that ought to go back to the public. And what we've been saying all along is give it back. Give it all back. Hashtag give it back, right? That's what we need to do. These are monies that the taxpayers of Minnesota have provided to the government. We don't need them. We already have one of the largest budget increases, maybe the largest in the history of the state, and now we're going to spend even more on top of that. The other point I'd like to make is after repeated promises about property taxes, and the governor's saying we're going to raise taxes on the 2%, so 100% will get property tax relief. They spent $450 million to achieve property tax reductions, $425 million, I'm sorry, to achieve property tax reductions, and property taxes went up $125 million. That is not even efficient. That's not even good government. But it didn't work. Property taxes went up. A big, huge fail for the Democrats and their so-called property tax relief. 1 out of every 7 cities and counties, only 1, got property tax reduction. I'm glad Senator Sieben lives in one of them, but most of the state of Minnesota did not see property tax reductions. Check your property tax statement. On MNsure, this has been a failure. As Representative Kelby Woodard pointed out, we've not seen any willingness on the part of Democrats to address this. And related to this is that we have, in the budget that did not have any shifts and gimmicks, you've got a $1 billion deficit in the Healthcare Access Fund in the tails. $1 billion of deficits in the Access Fund. That money was diverted to go into the MNsure program, away from Minnesota Care. And the federal government was supposed to come in and shore that up, and now they're saying maybe they're not going to do that. So we have a huge problem. It's not even accounted for in this deficit stuff because it's in a separate account. It's not part of the general fund. So in addition to paying more for child care because of the child care unionization effort on the part of the governor, we've got a weaker K-12 system. We're also going to build a $90 million state office building. And as I said, stay tuned on when we'll see movement on the tax bill. We have to wait for the House Rules Committee to meet before we'll have any movement on these major things. So we'll see how long that takes. But that's where we are today. This is a tale of 2 budgets. It's the best of times, it's the worst of times, but it's the whole ball game. And people need to look at the big picture. Huge tax increase, huge spending increase, and lots of waste, and no reform. Now, any questions?
Are you guys going to offer your own proposal on the surplus?
Well, we have. I thought last week we talked about give it back. Let's give this back. We've got some additional things in mind to deal. We talked about doing the business-to-business tax repeals, and we should do that soon. We should have done it last week. I don't know what the holdup is. We've been talking about this ever since they got passed. People have said we should probably maybe rethink this. Last year before the special session, we had a big debate about this. We should get this done, get it done right away. The conformity of the federal tax code is a part of that. But we think in addition, there's the other monies, instead of keeping them to spend later, what we're saying and what we're talking about is what other things that we can do. We're getting some input from the public through our hashtag thing, and maybe it'll be some permanent tax relief in sales taxes. We're not sure. But we need to see this tax bill come through the Senate quickly, and we're not really interested in doing too much other things until we see what they do with that.
Give it all back accurate when you guys also want to do the rate increase for the long-term care and some of these. You've already sent $20 million out for propane. You guys want to do school lunches. Is that really all?
Yeah. I take the point. Yes, we have agreed as a caucus, I think, broadly to support the propane funding, the emergency propane funding. The 5% campaign really is a deferred promise that, in our opinion, is something that should have been done in the budget that was passed last year. I think it was a failure on the part of the Democrats to live up to that commitment. So yes, we'll still stand by the give it all back.
With an asterisk.
With an asterisk.
Senator Han, are
Yes.
you introducing any legislation to fix MNsure?
Me personally?
Anyone in the caucus? I haven't seen a ton of MNsure fixes on either side at this
Yes,
point.
I talked to Senator Benson yesterday, and I believe she has got a bill. I'm not sure if she's got it introduced yet, but and there's been things in the House that I think are indicative of what we would like to see. We think there are some things that we can do in the short term to improve the governance structure of the MNsure board and make sure that we don't do more harm by going to active purchasing, for example, or things of that nature. But I think we also need to question the validity of this whole structure going forward. We've got a president who passed a law, and now every month, every week, you read in the paper about, well, we're not going to do this, we're not going to do that. It seems like President Obama is saying, we've got a law, but if we don't really like how it's working, or maybe it's got a bad political effect, so we're going to delay things after the election. So he's just kind of making it up as he goes along. We're kind of wondering why we don't give Governor Dayton the same power to decide what he's going to do and when he's going to do it, and so that he can act in the best interest of the people of this state and not put the people of Minnesota through a very difficult time in dealing with their insurance. So we're working on some things. I think Senator Benson will have a pack. If it's not been introduced, it should be shortly.
But there's no like broad overhaul this year in terms of trying to change the whole system.
I don't know that we have the votes. I think I counted that.
Still, obviously if you're concerned about it, once you introduce legislation.
There will be, I think, as I said, Senator Benson is introducing some legislation. I know the people in the House are working on similar things, but I'm not sure we have the votes.
And Representative Dean has the bill that does that in the House. And basically, it looks at some of the amendments that we put together last year for the MNsure board in particular, and the oversight pieces. So we've introduced that legislation early in session, and we think that's a good first stop, good first step. And again, no hearing, no one wants to talk about it in the House except for Republicans.
Are you surprised that the House and Senate negotiators have not reached a deal on the minimum wage bill?
I think we'll have to check with the Rules Committee again to see when the Rules Committee will meet, and then maybe we'll see progress on that. No, I'm not surprised that they're having difficulty. I think, this is an election year. I think certainly there are things related to the election that are tied up in this, and maybe some things related to an office building over in St. Paul that might be related to the discussion that they're having. But in terms of the policy, lots of questions being raised, even by the Minneapolis paper, which are clearly not a conservative bunch, but they're really questioning this 950 move, and but it is, in our opinion, a little bit of a distraction from the major things that we ought to be doing, which is get this tax structure figured out and do some things permanently to reform MNsure and restrain the savings so it doesn't grow, or the spending so it doesn't grow faster than the economy.
To see procedural efforts next week to dislodge that tax bill that's coming over from the House?
You want me to reveal our strategy?
Well, similar to what you did on the propane thing. You forced the issue and got it done sooner.
Well, we're thinking about what we can do. We obviously would like to see this done, and we disagree with Senator Sieben and the others who say, well, people can wait. And I haven't done my taxes. Maybe I'm the delinquent here, but I haven't finished mine, and I know a lot of other people haven't. And I think it's important that we do this and act quickly, especially for the business. The warehousing tax hasn't even taken effect yet. We should get that done right away and make sure that those businesses, to the extent that they're still listening, don't leave town. And I don't know what the delay is. Well, I do know what the delay is. It has to do with the Rules Committee in the House. But we should do it quickly, and whether we can help that along, we're certainly interested. We're going to do everything we can on our side and within our powers to make that happen.
Just to be clear, your contention is that the Senate office building is a bargaining chip for both the tax bill and the minimum wage?
Did I say that? All I know is that there's a lot of negotiating that goes on in a session. I think we all understand that. We've got a thing that's very important to Senator Bach, and we all understand that. And we also have a House up for election that probably isn't a high thing on their priority to spend $90 million to build a big office building across the street. That's probably not a top thing they want to go to an election talking about. And so I think since the Senate is not up for election and you've got all these things in play, you want to keep them in motion so that you can negotiate at the end of the day the deal that works for both sides. So just saying that I've seen this happen before. My prediction is that when the Senate Rules Committee meets and figures things out, then things will start to happen pretty quickly. That's my prediction.
And as we always say, that's a question of priorities, right? So $90 million for a Senate office building for 47 senators, that's, oh, yep, I'm sorry, and that's roughly $2 million per senator, right? For 47 Senate officers, or for Senate offices in the Senate office building. We're talking about $2 million for a school lunch program per year. I think that's a real missed priority. The Democrats last year could have done this for school lunch programs and instead decided to use the Senate office building as a priority. And I think, when you go back to give it all back, this is a matter of priorities. And there are some priorities that were missed last year because the legislature, under Democrat leadership, decided to spend it on things that were not priorities for Minnesotans. And now they have to go back and say, well, wait a minute, what about this school lunch program that Representative McDonald brought up last year on the House floor, and it failed? Now, all of a sudden, it's a priority for Minnesota Democrats after they decided to spend all this money on things that are not priorities for Minnesotans. So yeah, we can give it all back. There's $1 million sitting in reserve waiting for a school climate center that doesn't exist today. That money could be spent today on school lunch programs as a priority, not sitting in a lockbox waiting for some school climate center that doesn't even exist.
Anything else? Thank you. Thanks for hanging around. Appreciate it.